After Star Trek Into Darkness's series' best financial success, you would have thought that the third entry in the series would have been easy to put together, like Duplo. Instead, it ended up being like Edward Scissorhands trying to crochet. Script problems, director availability, and a studio keen to keep a lid on costs meant that the series would eventually go where no one had gone before, apart from Canadians William Shatner, James Doohan, and Nicole de Boer. Star Trek Beyond. Directed by Justin Lin from a script by Simon Pegg and Doug Jung, this would also be the first time a Trek film was filmed in studios away from Los Angeles, this time in Vancouver. It's good to know your entire industry exists purely because you're cheaper than somebody in LA doing the same job. Set several years into the 5-year mission, the isolation is taking its toll on Kirk and the crew. On visiting the new Federation starbase Yorktown, Kirk has been thinking about giving up the captain's chair and taking on a post as an administrator. Spock, meanwhile, has been ruminating on his own future, feeling he needs to help repopulate Vulcan, something that he can't do with Uhura, which precipitates a breakup. He's also learned that his future self, Ambassador Spock, has passed away. As a result, Spock needs to consider whether he stays behind on the Enterprise or go back to Vulcan and become a DJ. But that indulgent, self-reflective twaddle will have to wait, as Adventure Comes Our Callin'. A distress call sees the Enterprise navigating a sketchy part of space known as Space Tenderloin to assist a downed spacecraft. But no, it's a ruse, and the ship is attacked by aliens led by a guy called Crawl. The Enterprise is heavily damaged and Kirk gives the order to abandon ship. It's the third film in the reboot series, so, by law, the ship has to be destroyed. Despite the hit, Kirk will take on his insurance premiums. It's also a great way to break up the crew into smaller groups that don't often interact with each other. Uhura and Sulu are part of the crew captured by Crawl. Chekhov and Kirk have to visit the Enterprise wreckage to retrieve an alien artifact that everybody's looking for. Spock and McCoy are thrown together like two tomcats in a cage, with the Doctor trying to keep his injured frenemy alive without any of his usual medical tools. Scotty meets Jayla, who had managed to make her home in the wreckage of an older Federation starship, the U.S.S. Franklin, that crashed on the planet decades ago, by now really screwing up Kirk since he was basically now uninsurable, and he couldn't go on his dad's policy since, well, next time he'll be sure to put the vessel in Uhura's name. Jayla is the star of this film, with her scenes with both Scotty and Kirk proving to be the highlight of the movie. Uhura, Sulu and Chekhov don't feel as involved in the action, despite Uhura facing off against Crawl longer than anyone else. Idris Elba as Crawl is great, and the secret of his identity is handled 1,000 times better than Khan in the previous film. Also, there's way less annoying lens flare, or maybe there's just not enough annoying lens flare. You decide. This is the first Trek film in a long time that tried to be about something. Kirk is wondering whether there's more to life than gallivanting around the cosmos, and is thinking of giving up his captain's chair. Spock feels he needs to be more Vulcan. Except these are really only things at the start and end of the film, rather than informing any of the action or character motivations, so it all ends up like a chicken Caesar salad with the sauce on the side, which doesn't get touched at all. This film kind of makes you want to see this cast do this sort of thing as a TV series, rather than them trying to make a huge summer film every few years. The writers and director have tried to write a love letter to Star Trek in this film. Perhaps it's not a particularly sexy love letter to Trek, and there are no dick pics attached. It feels so much more Star Trek than the first two films in this reboot series, but also not as dynamic. The plot is certainly less obtuse and full of logical inconsistencies than before, but perhaps this is because everything is explained. Any action scene is basically narrated by the guy in the chair, like a video game NPC.
Once you've primed the hatch, you'll have to exit the chamber immediately. If the hatch is open when the processor cycles and you're in it, you're going to get sucked into space.
But Beyond is just missing something. It's, I don't know, a spark. It's all competent and there's nothing outright bad about this film. It's solid filmmaking. It's good even. It just doesn't feel like it's sweating all that much. There's no feeling that the script is aiming high enough. It's really hard to explain. It's like getting Americans to understand what Eurovision is or the rules of offside. A good comparison would be Star Trek Insurrection, a film that is in no way bad, but just feels a lesser effort than the film that preceded it. Beyond is well directed and acted. The script's playful banter shows that the writers understand the characters in the universe much better than the earlier movies.
Music's a bit old-fashioned for my taste, not to mention very loud and distracting, but hey, well played.
But again, it's easy to complain that while the first two films were incredibly shallow action fests, there's still very little depth to Beyond. Like watching Kardashians while relaxing in your own filth in a kid's wading pool.
No, please.
Captain, after you. I insist.
There's a touch of sadness associated with this film, as Anton Yelchin was killed in an accident shortly before the film's released, shortly after the passing of Leonard Nimoy. Plans for a fourth film were announced, with Kirk meeting his father, played again by Chris Hemsworth, but those plans seem to have fallen apart in the wake of this film's underperformance on release in 2016, often attributed to a crowded marketplace at the time, or perhaps too much beer. It's a shame, because while they'd finally remembered how to make a Star Trek film, they managed to make one that nobody who didn't cosplay as a Wiggle actually wanted to see. Beyond is unique for a Star Trek film in that the end titles feature a pop song by Rihanna, who is possibly a replacement for another popular singer who dropped out when she realised the film wasn't named after her.
Let's make some noise. That's a good choice.
Another thing that's happened since Beyond's release was that CBS, which had the TV rights to Trek, and Paramount, which had the movie rights, have recombined again, like goddamn Tuvix. So now we'll have to see how any potential movie Treks are handled, and whether they'll be more tightly integrated with shows like Discovery or Picard. Star Trek Beyond, even years after its release, may or may not end up being the last hurrah for this cast. If that's the case, then it's a decent way to end the series on a hopeful note. More importantly, it took 3 movies called Star Trek for us to end up with one Star Trek film. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.